So our text in the middle of Luke 24 takes place late Sunday afternoon, 3 days after Jesus died. Two people are trudging from Emmaus to Emmaus from Jerusalem, which was about 7 miles. So think of us walking to Linville. And they're downcast, according to verse 17, just full of sadness as they walked, because the bottom had fallen out of their world. Their brightest hopes had centered on a man who had now died. But their mourning had given them plenty to talk about. They were trying to sort through a bewildering series of events. The tomb of this one who had died was empty, and there were some reports of angels had persons desecrated his tomb. A stranger catches up with them and falls in step with them. And as we heard, as Sam read the text, this is Jesus, they find out. Verse 16 says they were kept from recognizing him. Perhaps when we're in grief, we tend not to look at people, perhaps. But it was probably more than that. The other accounts of people meeting the resurrected Jesus also mention not recognizing him. So they'd been talking, but they naturally stopped when this stranger joined them. But this stranger wanted to make a connection with them. So he gets them to talk. He asks them a question. Verse 17, what are you discussing so intently as you walk along? And he gets sort of a rude response. You must be the only one around who doesn't know. Hurting folk often will snap at us. But Jesus didn't take it personal. He persisted. Well, what things happened? And they soon poured out their perplexity to him. There was this man. We thought he was a prophet. He was powerful, but he's now dead. We had hoped that he would redeem Israel. And we today sort of smile. The cross was going to keep Jesus from redeeming us. But verse 21, it's now the third day. Verse 22, some of our women went to the tomb early this morning, but they couldn't find his body. All those facts could have been like exciting and exhilarating. Our woman went to the tomb and found it empty. They saw angels that said he's alive. Some of our men went to the tomb also and found it like the women said. But instead, they turn everything into bad news. When we're down, we're all pretty good at turning whatever happens into something bad, finding reasons not to take comfort, not to have hope. The angels say he's alive, but we didn't see him. Even the empty tomb is bad news. The tomb is empty, and our women couldn't find his body. To us, the good news, of course, is obvious, but not to them. In their despair, they slanted everything negative. But at least they were pouring out their hearts to Jesus. And so healing could begin. Verse 25, Jesus gave them the diagnosis. He said, why can't you understand? And I'm sure the tone was one of compassion. not of contempt. How foolish you dear people are. How can you be so slow to believe all that the prophets said? Didn't you know that the Messiah would have to suffer before he was given his glory? So that was the diagnosis, not believing the prophets. Then he started doling out the remedy. Verse 27, and beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in the scriptures concerning himself. He gives them a Bible study. Jesus spent who knows how long, an hour more, working through the scriptures. And verse 32, toward the end of what Sam read, they describe it as Jesus opening the scriptures to them. It says, didn't our hearts burn within us? As Jesus went through Moses and all the prophets, showing what was said of the Messiah. Many of us would give our eye teeth to get the notes on that Bible study that Jesus gave there as he went through the Old Testament. Jesus went through the scriptures and corrected their mistaken expectations about the Messiah. They were thinking that Messiah was going to come and free them as a nation and set up an earthly kingdom like David did, like the Maccabees did. Their dream was that Jesus would use his miracles, his presence, to free them from the power of Rome. But instead, Jesus was executed by the power of Rome. And their hopes died when Jesus died. But they misunderstood the scriptures and the purposes of God. God didn't want to just redeem them politically, but to redeem them on the inside as well. Free them from hate, from shame, from guilt. And strong arm power plays, a Messiah who would come in and clear out the Romans, would only change things externally for who knows how many years. The inside, our inside, can only be changed through a love that lets us change. A love that is willing to suffer, willing to let us not change, so that we get to choose. And so passages like Isaiah 53 show that the Messiah suffers and is killed like a sacrificial lamb. That's Isaiah 53 verses 1 to 9. And then the next verses show this same Messiah triumphant, reigning. Didn't make sense beforehand. What mistaken expectations do we have? Do you and I have? What Bible study do we need? The way that we find out is we take the brokenness in our life, we take the disappointments we have with God, and then we do a Bible study. We let God speak to us. The two walking to Emmaus, they had their Bible study. They were beginning in that study to see God's expectations, open to the idea that God might even be working in these events that had just happened the last 3 days. In verse 28, as they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he were gone farther. But they urged him strongly, "Stay with us. It's nearly evening. The day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. What a blessing that they were given to hospitality, that they made that invitation. As they sat down to eat, then this stranger took bread and blessed and broke it and gave it to them. And verse 31, their eyes were open and they recognized him. Hearing that the events of the last 3 days might actually have been part of God's plan opened them to the idea that God might be working, and what else might God be doing? Opened them even to seeing a resurrected Jesus. After our Bible studies, we are more apt to see Jesus in our lives as well. God is always there, but sometimes because our expectations are wrong, we are blinded to God. We don't always see what God is doing because we are expecting something else. We don't know our Bible well enough. And so we have ideas of God's purposes, God's plans that aren't God's ideas. And then when God doesn't fulfill our schemes that we have for him, we feel like God is letting us down. For instance, I can easily think that God is highly interested in my creature comfort. But no, God is highly interested in my love, in my faith. I might think God cares that when I try to do work for him, that I have good success, that I have good results. But no, God cares that when I do work for him, that I do it in love, that I am faithful. God cares more about the process than necessarily the results. No doubt, when the two arrived at Emmaus, they were tired. It was a long walk. The day had been long, and it was going to be dark if it wasn't already. But nevertheless, when they realized Jesus was there, they immediately got up and they walked the 7 miles back to Jerusalem to tell their story. When God does what we don't expect, when we see him where we had no clue that he would be, when we see what he is up to, we're going to explode if we don't tell someone. They went back to their small group, their church, and they shared what had happened, and they found out Jesus had appeared to them too. Hallelujah.